She walked in like she owned the place. No text, no warning, just the sound of her suitcase wheels scraping my hardwood floor. I was gone one weekend for work, and when I came back, my sister had moved in. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom always said this would be mine." That sentence, it burned. Then she changed the locks, told the neighbors she bought the house off me, started throwing parties and calling herself the new lady of the house. But what she didn't know was that I still had the title. So I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I filed. And when the court date came, I brought every paper she never thought I'd keep. She moved in like a queen. She left like a thief. It was a Sunday evening. I had just come off a 12-hour shift at the hospital. My scrubs still smelled like antiseptic and stress. I remember fumbling for my keys, exhausted but grateful for a quiet night at home. Except, when I opened the door, I wasn't greeted by silence. I heard the TV blaring from the living room. Someone was laughing, loudly, and there, sprawled on my couch like it belonged to her, was my sister, Melissa. She had 2 open suitcases on the floor, her clothes tossed everywhere like she was marking territory. Our eyes met, and all she said was, "Oh, hey, surprise?" Not a question, not an apology, just those 2 words, like she'd dropped by for coffee. I stood frozen in the doorway. "Melissa, what are you doing here?" She shrugged. Long story. Jason and I broke up. He kicked me out. I figured I'd crash here a bit. She figured, as if this was a hotel. "You could have called," I said, my voice low. She rolled her eyes like I was the dramatic one. "Claire, come on. We're sisters. You live alone. It's not that deep." I swallowed everything I wanted to say. The tiredness in my bones. The anxiety in my gut. She was right about one thing: I did live alone. And part of me felt guilty for wanting to say no. So I nodded. "A couple nights," I said. "Thanks," she chirped, already reaching for the remote. What I didn't realize was that she'd already made copies of the key. By Wednesday, she was ordering packages to the house. By Friday, she'd moved her cat in. By the next Monday, my coffee machine was missing, replaced by some cheap knockoff she thought worked better. I tried to stay patient. I told myself she was just adjusting. But patience turns into silence. And silence turns into resentment. One night, I came home late to find my bedroom door open. She was wearing my sweater, the one Mom gave me the year she died. "Is this okay?" she asked, twirling in it like it was some show. I didn't even answer. I just turned away. I wanted to scream, but I said nothing. That week, Melissa started telling people she was staying permanently. She even updated her Instagram bio to PNW Living. She invited her friends over without asking. She hosted wine nights on Tuesdays. I couldn't sleep. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Then came the moment that broke me. I got home one evening and my key didn't work. I tried it again and again. Then I knocked. She opened the door, sipping from one of my mugs. "Oh, yeah. I changed the locks," she said casually. "For safety." "For safety," I whispered. "Yeah, like, just in case Jason shows up. You know how he is." She didn't even flinch, like it was normal, like I was the guest. I slept in my car that night. The passenger seat doesn't cradle your back the way your own bed does. And no amount of heating can warm the cold that comes from being unwanted in your own home. But something shifted in me. That night, alone in my Honda, parked 2 blocks down, I decided this was war. And I wouldn't fight with fists. I'd fight with paper, with proof, with the law. She thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. She mistook peace for passiveness, but she forgot I'm the one paying the mortgage, and I never signed over anything. She wanted to play queen of the castle, but I built the damn castle, and soon I would take it back. The next morning, I walked back to my house and knocked on the door. Melissa opened it, looking half asleep, hair in a bun, and chewing on my last granola bar. "Are you seriously going to act like this is normal?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She shrugged. "Claire, it's just a place. It's not like you're ever home anyway." That line stuck with me longer than I wanted to admit. Just a place I had worked 2 jobs to afford this home, skipped vacations, skipped rest. Every inch of that house was bought with my effort, and now she acted like it was some free hostel. Over the next few days, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of her Instagram posts, photos of the parties, recordings of her guests treating my house like a playground. I reached out to a local real estate attorney that someone at the hospital recommended. Her name was Ms. Drake, calm, smart, and with eyes like she's seen 100 messy family fights. She reviewed my documents, then leaned back and said, "Your sister is not a tenant. She's a squatter." The word hit me in the gut. You're within your rights to file for eviction. You own the home. Her stay was never formalized, and her behavior that only strengthens your case. I remember walking out of that office with shaking hands, but something inside me felt steady. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. I went to the courthouse that same day and filed the paperwork. 2 weeks. That's how long it would take for the court date. In that time, I didn't engage. I didn't argue. I let her dig her own grave. She had no idea. Melissa kept throwing parties. She let her new boyfriend move in. She even hung a framed quote in the hallway. "This house runs on wine, Wi-Fi, and women who know what they want." I looked at it every morning and smiled, because what I wanted was about to happen. The day of the court hearing, Melissa didn't even dress properly. She wore yoga pants and a crop top. I wore a suit. She thought this would be another one of my warnings. Another empty threat. But when the judge asked who held the deed and mortgage, I handed over the documents without a word. When he asked if Melissa had any lease agreement or written permission to live there, she had nothing. And when he read the decision aloud, she blinked like someone slapped her. She turned to me, red-faced, and hissed under her breath, "You're really kicking me out." I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, my voice didn't shake. "You kicked yourself out the moment you forgot who owned the door." The judge gave her 7 days to vacate, no exceptions. And when those 7 days passed, I stood by the window. She came down the steps with the same 2 suitcases she dragged in, but her posture had changed. No confidence, no smirk. Just silence. She glanced up at the window. I didn't wave. I didn't smile, but deep down, I felt something lift. Not revenge, not pride, just freedom. That was my house. And finally, it felt like home again. I thought evicting Melissa would be the end. But in some twisted way, it was just the beginning. The silence after she left was almost too quiet. No wine glasses clinking. No thumping bass from her Tuesday parties. No sarcastic laughter echoing from my kitchen. Just me, and my house, and the damage she left behind. She didn't just take up space. She left scars. Scratches on my wooden floors from her heels. A broken hinge on the bathroom cabinet. The smell of her perfume clinging to the couch like a ghost refusing to leave. I walked from room to room that first night, trying to reclaim my peace. It felt like touching something fragile, like any moment it could slip from my fingers again. But the worst part wasn't the furniture she ruined. It was the way she tried to rewrite the story. Because just 3 days after she left, she posted a video. Public. Tear-streaked. Captioned, "I was kicked out of my sister's house after escaping an abusive relationship." She chose walls over family. And suddenly, I wasn't just the homeowner. I was the villain. The comments poured in, blood should be thicker than property lines. How could a nurse have no heart if the roles were reversed? I bet she'd expect Melissa to take her in. My hands trembled reading them, each one a dagger, each one from someone who didn't know the truth. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but part of me knew no explanation would be enough for people who only saw one clip. So I did the only thing I could. I documented. Everything. Screenshots, dates, records, statements, not to fight fire with fire, but to hold the truth in my hand, in case it was ever needed. Meanwhile, Melissa wasn't done. She started showing up, not at the house, no, worse, at my job, Once during my night shift, she stood at the entrance of the ER, mascara running, claiming I had her medication inside. Security had to escort her out. Another time, she left a note on my windshield. You may have the house, but you'll always be alone in it. That one cut deeper than the court hearing. Because she knew. She knew how much loneliness scared me. How I used work to keep the silence at bay. But I wasn't alone because of the house. I was alone because of boundaries. Because I had the nerve to say, no more. My therapist once told me, sometimes healing comes after the scream you never let out. So one night, I drove up to Mount Tabor, stood at the overlook, and screamed. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. And after that, something softened, not forgiveness, but release. I began to rebuild, not just the house, but myself. I repainted the hallway Melissa had filled with passive-aggressive quotes. I bought a new lock one with a fingerprint scanner. I replaced the couch, burned the old one, actually. It felt ceremonial, like setting fire to a version of me that tolerated being walked on. Then, one afternoon in spring, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. It was from Melissa. Inside were 3 lines: I didn't come back because I was desperate. I came because I thought I still mattered to you. I was wrong. No apology, no ownership, just blame wrapped in sadness. I folded it neatly, tucked it inside a drawer I never open, because closure isn't something someone gives you. It's what you give yourself when you decide you're done bleeding. I thought I'd feel triumphant when I won. Instead, I felt clean, clear, whole, and that was more powerful than revenge. So now, when people ask me why I live alone in a house with 3 bedrooms, I just smile and say, because peace takes up space too, and it deserves room to stretch. Spring in Portland has this strange way of pretending everything's okay. Cherry blossoms bloom. Cafes spill out onto sidewalks. The rain softens. And yet, inside me, it still stormed. Melissa had been gone for 2 months. No messages, no calls, no surprise drop-ins. It should have felt like peace, but it felt more like waiting. Waiting for the next breach, the next post, the next betrayal. Because people like her don't just disappear. They linger in your inbox, in people's memories, in the way neighbors look at you like they're not sure who to believe. I started avoiding my usual grocery store. One too many glances from people who'd seen her viral sob story. At work, the whispers had faded, but the silence stayed. Some wounds don't bleed. They echo. One night, I walked into my kitchen and just stood there. The fridge hummed softly. Everything was exactly where I left it. And still, I felt displaced. So I did something unexpected. I invited someone over. Her name was Danny, a nurse from pediatrics. Funny. Sharp. She'd always brought me coffee when I looked like I hadn't slept. Which, let's be honest, was often. We sat on the porch that evening, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea, and watching the city lights flicker. She didn't ask about Melissa, but I told her anyway. And for the first time, I told it without breaking. No shaking voice, no cracked syllables, just the truth. Danny listened the way people listen when they know pain isn't always loud. When I finished, she said something I'll never forget. Survivors aren't the ones who escape. They're the ones who rebuild. That night, I slept with the windows open and dreamed of nothing. In the days that followed, I started making small changes. I turned Melissa's old room into a guest room with strict locks. I even adopted a rescue dog, named him Chance, because that's what he was, a second chance at trusting. He never asked questions, just wagged his tail like I was enough. But healing isn't linear, because one Thursday afternoon, I received another letter. This time legal. Melissa was filing a civil claim. Defamation, emotional damages. She claimed my eviction, and what followed cost her job opportunities and public dignity. She wanted financial compensation. I laughed when I read it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly her twisting accountability into victimhood. Again, I sent the document straight to Ms. Drake, She reviewed them with the calm of someone who's seen hurricanes try to soothe the people they blew through. "We'll respond professionally," she said, "but if it escalates, you have every right to countersue." That word countersue felt heavier than I expected. Not because I didn't want justice, but because I didn't want to become her. Consumed, reactive, always swinging back. So I told Ms. Drake something that surprised even me. "Let her speak. I'll stay silent. The truth is louder than anything she can post." And for once, silence didn't feel weak. It felt sovereign. Like choosing not to attend a fire you didn't start. The court date came. Melissa showed up in a suit too tight and a face too smooth. She always knew how to dress for sympathy. But the judge didn't buy it. He read every document, asked every question, and in the end, her case was dismissed. No payout, no pity. Just a gentle but firm, "Ms. Evans, this court does not reward manipulation." She didn't cry this time. She didn't scream. She just walked out, quiet, and for the first time, I felt sorry for her. Not because I wanted her back, not because I forgave her, but because she had nothing left to twist. No one else to blame, just her, and the mirror. I walked out that courthouse lighter, not because I won, but because I didn't lose myself in trying to prove I was right. I went home, let chance out, sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and the sunset, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't think about Melissa. I didn't think about courtrooms or locks or the silence she left behind. I just breathed, and it smelled like freedom. The next few weeks unfolded like petals in slow motion. I returned to my routines, but something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just about peace anymore. It was about agency, about reclaiming the narrative I'd let others distort for too long. I started writing again. Journals, little notes, reflections, not for courtrooms or proof, but for myself. To remind me that surviving wasn't the end of the story, it was the middle. I began volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. Once a week, I'd bring meals or help organize donations. No one there knew about Melissa, and I didn't need them to. What mattered was the energy, the way broken things could find purpose again, the way even shattered glass could catch light. One night, after closing up at the shelter, I stood outside beneath a flickering street lamp. The wind whispered across my skin, and I thought about all the places I'd been forced to hold back. The words I hadn't said, the pain I hadn't voiced. And I realized there was power in restraint, but there was also power in release. So I wrote Melissa one final letter. I never sent it, but I read it aloud to myself. "You may never understand what you took from me, and that's okay. I no longer need your understanding to heal. I forgive you, not because you earned it, but because I deserve to let go." Then I folded it, lit a match, and watched it burn. The ash danced into the sky like a promise. And in that moment, I felt free not because justice was served, but because I was no longer holding the blade by the wrong end. Melissa taught me something, not how to hurt, but how to rise, how to turn betrayal into boundaries, and how to make space where chaos used to live. I don't know where she is now. Maybe another city, another story, another stage. But I know where I am. Home. Not the kind you fight for in court, but the kind you build inside yourself, brick by brick, after everything else has crumbled. Fan 4. It started with a voicemail. I hadn't heard her voice in months. And yet, there it was. Soft. Controlled. Almost rehearsed. "Hey Claire, I was wondering if we could talk. I'm in town for a bit. I think we should clear the air, maybe grab coffee." I listened to that message 3 times, not because I missed her, but because I wanted to hear what manipulation sounded like with a polite tone. I didn't respond, and then the knocking started. One afternoon, just as I returned from work, I saw her, Melissa, standing on my porch like time hadn't passed. Same too-perfect smile. Same sunglasses pushed into her hair like she just walked off a movie set. "Claire, she said, arms already opening for a hug. I didn't move. You're trespassing. She blinked, like I'd slapped her. Wow, still bitter, huh? She stepped back, hands raised, but her smirk never left. Look, I know things got dramatic, but we're family. Family, that word again. Used like a crowbar, meant to pry open doors that should stay locked. I told her I had nothing to say, and I meant it. She stood there a while longer, maybe waiting for a crack to appear in my resolve. But I had reinforced every inch of my life with steel. And Melissa, she no longer knew the code. I closed the door, and for the first time in our lives, I didn't feel guilty for shutting her out, but she wasn't done. 3 days later, my neighbor slipped me a flyer. Melissa was hosting a healing circle at a local community center, theme When Family Abandons You. And there she was on the flyer, head tilted, soft lighting, eyes watery. The caption, How I Survived Being Erased by the People I Loved Most. I laughed, then I cried, because it was absurd, but also because part of me still wondered if she believed it. And if she did, what did that make me a villain in a story I didn't write? I called Danny that night, told her everything. She didn't tell me to ignore it, didn't tell me to fight it. She just asked one question. What do you need to feel safe again? It caught me off guard, because no one had asked me that. Not since Mom died. Not since the locks were changed on my own door. And I realized safety wasn't just about walls. It was about ownership, of space, of voice, of truth. So I made a decision not to retaliate, but to speak. I booked a room at the same community center. 1 week later, no flyer, no dramatic lighting, just one title, Rebuilding After Betrayal. I didn't expect many to show up, but the chairs filled slowly. Nurses I worked with, a few women from the shelter, even 2 of my neighbors. And I told my story, not with anger, not to expose her, but to reclaim it. I spoke about boundaries, about how love without respect is just control in a prettier dress, about how silence can rot you from the inside. And when I finished, no one clapped. They didn't need to. They just nodded, some with tears, some with clenched fists, because they understood. Afterward, a woman in her 50s came up to me, said, "Your story isn't rare. What's rare is surviving it without becoming like them." And that stuck. Melissa tried to paint me as heartless, but the truth is I was just done bleeding for people who sharpened knives behind their smiles. She moved on eventually, found a new city, I heard, started a podcast, rebranded herself as a family dynamics advocate, and I let her, because what she does with her story is hers, and what I've done with mine is finally mine too. I still get the occasional message. Strangers who watched one of her videos, reaching out to tell me how awful I must be, but I don't answer them, because I'm not in that chapter anymore. I've built something better, a life that doesn't hinge on apologies I'll never get, a life full of open windows, not locked doors, a life where I get to be the narrator, not the footnote. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's fairy tale, so be it. I'd rather be the villain in a lie than the victim in my own home. Fan 5. They say closure is a myth, that we never really get to tie the ends into a perfect knot. But I disagree, because one morning, I opened my mailbox and found an envelope that proved otherwise. It was from the county clerk's office. I had almost tossed it, thinking it was another tax notice. But when I opened it, I found a certified letter, informing me that Melissa had filed for bankruptcy, and she'd listed me as a personal creditor. Apparently, in her desperate attempts to build a new life, she had borrowed against my name. Falsely, she used our old shared address, leveraged an old bill with both names on it from years ago, and claimed she had co-signed debt. But this time, it wasn't just about lies, it was fraud, and it was federal. I called my attorney. She read the letter and went stone cold. "This isn't family drama anymore. Claire," she said, "this is a crime." And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt something close to resolve. I filed a formal dispute, Attached every document deed of the house, timelines, eviction records, even her old text messages. It took 3 weeks, but when the investigation came through, the conclusion was clear. She'd forged the connection, used my name to cover her own debts, and she had no legal right. I was removed from the bankruptcy claim, and Melissa, she was flagged. Her case was now under review for fraudulent filing. A warrant wasn't issued, not yet, but her new life, her shiny podcast, her advocacy persona, it cracked, sponsors pulled out, venues canceled, and the irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd been painted as the cold one, the cruel sister, but the truth always finds its light. One morning, Danny and I sat by the fireplace, Chance curled up at our feet, warm and safe. She looked at me and asked, "How does it feel?" I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "It doesn't feel like revenge. It feels like restoration." Because that's what it was. Not punishment, not pettiness, but the slow, patient return of everything I had been robbed of: my name, my peace, my truth. In the months that followed, I wrote more. Not about Melissa, but about survival, resilience. I published an essay in a local magazine. It went viral. Not because it exposed her, but because it reflected so many others. People who had been quietly betrayed by the ones who were supposed to protect them. People who had been made to feel guilty for saying no. People like me. I was invited to speak at a conference on emotional boundaries and legal empowerment. The same week, Melissa's name appeared in the news, this time not as a victim, but as a subject of pending charges. I didn't celebrate, I didn't gloat, because by then, I had outgrown the need to be proven right. I had something better. A home filled with light. A dog who waited for me by the door. A woman who loved me not because I was strong, but because I had dared to be soft. And most of all, I had myself, whole, unbroken, unbought. Melissa's story may keep shifting. She may rewrite it again and again, but mine, it's written in stone. And stone doesn't lie. Stone stands. I used to think justice would look like her in handcuffs. But no, justice looked like me, waking up without fear, drinking coffee on my porch, laughing out loud, loving without looking over my shoulder. It looked like letting go of the version of me that tolerated disrespect in the name of family, and becoming the version that said I am enough, and I deserve to be safe in my own life. So if you ask me today who won, I'll smile, because this was never about winning. It was about returning to myself, to truth, to a home no one could take again.